Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? How are you doing? It is Thursday. Is it Thursday? I'll just question everything, or I'll say it twice, once in the form of a question. It is Thursday, isn't it Thursday? I forget. I can't keep track of this stuff. September 7th, 2023. Time for another show. Are levels 5x5 justice? They are. Okay. And so now we know you're hearing this nonsense. Hey, good morning. Plenty to do today. Plenty to catch up on. It is a Thursday. It's a back-to-back Greg Dworkin appearance kind of a week, like all the rest of them. But we were Monday-less this week, which, on the whole, is probably a good thing. But it does, it messes with your mind if you set your internal clock by Kagro in the morning. I do. I have no other choice. I mean, I'm me in the morning, and so there's no escaping it. But for you, I don't know. Anyway, lots to do today. Let's see, what's in the hints about the stories that Justice is watching today? Let's see, Moms for Liberty is running the Nazi ethics office in Florida. Uh-oh, I better get that story. I don't think I have that one prepared. Not a surprise, per se, but you still hate to hear it. And then finally, what else has he got here? MAGA lawyers in Georgia, so will they still get their severance pay if they can't sever from the other 17? Okay, good question. That definitely is on the radar. My email inbox has been overrun by, I guess, interns at the Hill or something. Although it's the end of summer, they should all be returning to school. Maybe these are incoming college interns for the new semester. I don't know. But my inbox is packed with promotional emails from the Hill, and they're all pretty good hints this time. And I hate to respond to this kind of pressure, but there's a lot of good headlines that hint at a lot of good and interesting news. And I think the one I clicked on first, and I don't know whether I'm going to give into my impulses and click the rest of them or not, but I couldn't resist clicking on the headline, 5 takeaways from Peter Navarro's contempt trial. My hope was that one of the 5 things taken away from Peter Navarro's contempt trial was Peter Navarro, but he's there. And eventually, I hope they'll clap him in irons and take him away, although this isn't usually that kind of proceeding. Although if they had done a civil contempt proceeding against him, you can, in fact, get yourself clapped in irons. You can at the end of a criminal contempt proceeding as well, but usually for a relatively short and a defined prison term, jail term, really. But you can get yourself stored in cold storage indefinitely in a civil contempt proceeding that's ongoing. Anyway, here's the list, I guess, or here's the setup of the story. Federal prosecutors and defense attorneys for Trump's former economic advisor, Peter Navarro, rested their case Wednesday. Everybody's resting. In a trial involving charges of contempt of Congress after Navarro refused to cooperate with the House committee investigating the events of January 6th. The first count facing Navarro pertains to his failure to turn over documents related to the committee's probe. The second to his failure to appear for a deposition before the panel's investigators. He has pleaded not guilty, but he didn't show up. So, he's guilty of that. But whether or not criminal liability will attach is the question here. Let's see. So where are the takeaways? Are there any? I don't know. I guess these are the different section headings are the takeaways here. Executive privilege takes center stage. They've been doing that nonstop since this whole thing began. It hasn't worked anywhere as far as I can tell. A restless Navarro is number 1, actually, here. Navarro stood for the entirety of Wednesday's proceeding, which lasted 6 hours, aside from breaks. That's interesting. You don't have to do that, as they point out. Typically, defendants sit at a table next to their attorneys throughout the trial, sometimes passing notes or leaning over to confer with their counsel. But Navarro stood off to the side throughout the first day. That is unusual. He sometimes paced around his corner of the courtroom or shifted from one leg to another. He switched between wringing his hands, and that's usually a democratic function, and crossing his arms as the trial went on. And when one witness identified Navarro for the record, the former Trump aide raised 2 fingers to his forehead and saluted him. He is a weird guy. At several points during the trial, Navarro walked over to Woodward, one of his attorneys, and whispered in his ear before receding to his corner of the courtroom. Closing arguments will be made Thursday, that's today, this morning, before the case goes to a jury for deliberation. And they too, you know what, they were swinging from trapeze above the jury box the whole time. It's very weird. Everybody there's some crazy energy going on in this courtroom. I really don't know what that's about, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just weird. Navarro is kind of a weirdo. And I think Greg Dworkin wants to talk a little bit about what a weirdo he is, perhaps. Or maybe it's another of the weirdos that he wants to talk about. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. Speaking of weirdos.
Yeah.
How am I? I'm fine.
How you doing? I'm weirdo. All right.
How you doing? When I was a kid growing up, weirdos are little plastic models that you had painted of, various and sundry cars, odd things.
Oh.
Driven by demons. I loved weirdos. And they were great to collect. But that was then, and this is now.
I've seen those
you have a real live one. I have to point out a couple of things about Peter Navarro.
He's a weirdo. And that never meant that for me, but that's interesting. Okay. Yes.
First of all.
One.
His defense is they never told me I had to show up, so I'm not guilty, Your Honor.
Well, 99% of life is showing up.
Look, you've said this like 1,000 times on the air. You can't prove that they actually delivered the paperwork in my hand.
Well, I mean,
that's his defense.
That's not a great one.
That's why it only took a couple hours.
That's always true about the about paperwork and Trump people, but I mean, well, just as a matter of what can I tell you? We'll tell you that in court that the whole,
I'm not making it up. That was his defense.
I understand. It's just that's so ludicrous. Just I guess if you have any understanding of the way a court proceeding even starts, I mean, the whole thing is premised on, yes, we did. I have a signed affidavit that says we handed it to you or to your duly authorized agent, and nothing begins until that happens. So, no. That's like, no one told me this was planet Earth. I don't have to abide by. Yeah. All right. You're crazy. All right. Well, that's Navarro for you. Oh, are those the pictures of the weirdos? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Anyway.
Yes, he's wrong.
The other thing is that you were describing a lot about Navarro and how he was behaving in the courtroom.
Yeah.
But I want to point out that anybody who ever watched a Trump-era COVID press conference would recognize that behavior, where Trump was often on stage with whoever, a speechless Tony Fauci or the lady with the scarf,
right,
who nobody remembers anymore. But Navarro was often to the side, pacing and making himself otherwise annoying, and people would look at him and say, "You're a trade guy. What the hell are you doing involved in COVID stuff?" And the answer was he was a COVID advisor.
Sure, why not?
Official or unofficial, I don't know why. And just highlights just how bad, a lot of the COVID response from Trump is that nobody remembers anymore.
Anybody who wants to advise me on COVID, stand up. Oh, Peter.
Yeah, something like that. You're already pace around the outside and,
I want you to fidget nervously. I can do that.
So today is the summary. It was a very, very quick sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And as I said on Twitter this morning, if you're going to talk about political news,
no, I'm not going.
You have to start with a 10-minute summary of legal news.
Yeah.
What happened yesterday? What's going to happen today? What's going to happen tomorrow? And that's going to be true for months. And if you think that's good for Trump, the narrator says, no, it wasn't.
It's working great. Okay.
So there's that Navarro thing. That's one of the many things that happened yesterday and will happen today. Mm-hmm. Next on my list here, because I want to check these off, I think they're all sort of important. Roger Parloff, who was missing, he was on vacation for the sentencing of the Proud Boys, has a nice summary of what actually happened.
Okay. They got sentenced
And this
to jail.
summary concentrates a little bit on the amount of time that they got. And I thought that was interesting. We were talking about this yesterday.
Yes.
For example, he says, before the trial, the U.S. attorneys offered Proud Boys plea deals, which was revealed yesterday by his Connecticut Looney Tune defense attorney, Norm Pattis, the Alex Jones attorney.
Oh, all right.
And they passed on it. And so the result, Enrique Tarrio, for example, was offered 9 to 11 years for a plea deal. He refused. He got 22.
Well, bad gambler.
Nordian was offered 6 to 8. He got 18. Biggs was offered 6 to 8. He got 17. Rel was offered 6 to 7. He got 15. And Pizzola was offered 4 to 5. He got 10. So the point is that on the one hand, they were offered a better deal. They decided not to take it. This is FAFO territory.
Yeah. I mean, no one likes to, admit it and take prison, but those deals are serious. They bring you less than they're about to get.
Yeah, so they either
the
figured that they were going to get off or that Trump would win and he'd pardon them.
Yeah, but they could be pardoned for a 6-year term too.
So the plea offers were made public by Norm Pattis because he plans to argue on appeal that the disparities are an unconstitutional tax on exercising their right to a trial. Now, you have to remember, a narrator will remind you, Norm Pattis is a Looney Tune.
I mean, I don't see where they were deprived of the right to a trial.
No, but because they went on trial, they got twice what the government was offering, you see.
Well, yes.
Therefore, what Pattis is saying, well, if you don't take the plea deal and you go to trial, they tax you and give you more years than you would have gotten if you took the plea deal and cooperated.
But they compensate you for waiving your right to trial. When they take that, you get years off your sentence. There's compensation offered. What's your problem?
My problem, Your Honor, is that my clients have to go to jail, and I don't want that.
See. Okay, well, no.
And besides, I also
that
need
is not how this
appeal
works.
because they pay me.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's that. Oh, I have a thing for that somewhere. Well, I know one of these things has got a. Oh well, never mind. But
look, I mean, everybody's entitled to have their case present in the best possible light, and that's why you have attorneys.
Okay.
That's their job.
We do have that.
I get that, but again, I have to remind people, Norm Pattis is like a nut job.
Yes. Oh, here's the judge ruling on it.
That is not how this works!
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
I knew I had one somewhere like that.
Okay, next
She's
legal
very
tidbit
upset.
before we get to the, I think, bigger, more important legal news. Mar-a-Lago IT worker was told he won't face charges in special counsel probe.
Oh.
That is
That's
to
in my
say,
email box,
employee
too.
number 4, Yustil
Yes.
Taveras, was assured by federal prosecutors that he was no longer the target of a criminal probe because you cooperated, so we're going to drop any charges against you.
Look at that. That's another one
That's
of those
what happens
bargains
when you're
that
a good
works.
guy.
Yeah. And will you help us? Yes. Well, then you will not be in trouble. Oh.
Right.
All
In
right.
the Wall Street Journal, Brad Raffensperger wrote a column
What a
that
gem.
I can't keep Trump off the ballot.
Womp, womp.
Voters should decide elections, not me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But
So he makes that argument, and SV.A
yes.
takes a look at it and says, well, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Right?
I mean,
what
he
if
didn't,
a 25-year-old wanted to run? What if a citizen of Great Britain, born and raised there, wanted to run for president, wanted to get on the ballot in Georgia?
Which citizen
What
is it?
if Obama wanted to run again? What if would Raffensperger be equally powerless to keep them off the ballot?
Yes. According to Raffensperger.
Yeah, so, it raises some questions about his defense there. Look, I get that Georgia isn't going to do it, but Colorado is. They've already started the process. And as Greg Sargent pointed
Right. Colorado.
the other day, it only takes one state to do this. Why would you do it in Colorado or California or a blue state as opposed to, let's say, a purple state or a swing state? The point is to get it on record, and whoever wins or loses challenges it, and then it goes to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And once the Supreme Court decides, that is going to decide it for every state. So if you are interested in taking a legalistic approach to try to get Trump off the ballot,
I'll
your
take
play is to get it to the Supreme Court.
Certainly a good idea to get the ball rolling as soon as possible.
And it only takes one state to do that.
Okay.
So I'm just pointing that out.
I guess.
Judge Ludig says that's not unreasonable.
Okay.
A lot of conservative legal scholars say, it's not
At least
unreasonable.
two
It's not
that we
frivolous.
It isn't.
Will it work? That's a different story altogether.
Yeah.
Is it a good idea? That's a completely different discussion.
True. We could have it.
We can have it.
But all right,
It's a
yeah,
good-
that's
I
why
think it's
you
a
would
great
have
idea.
it in a
I think
democratic
he's an
state.
insurrectionist and he shouldn't run.
It would be interesting for the Trump campaign, if they thought there was danger in bringing this thing to litigation, to be banned from the ballot in an overwhelmingly blue state and then say, meh, I wasn't going to win it anyway.
You might argue, hey, that's bad for the election. You're interfering with the process. But
No,
here's
I'm
the
not.
fact.
That
and
is
we'll
the
get to that
process.
when we do polling, probably after the break.
Okay.
Okay?
All
If you're a
right.
Republican, you're going to vote for a Republican. You don't really care who it is.
Well, that's
And if you're a Democrat, you're going to vote for a Democrat, and you sort of really don't care who it is. You're going to complain about it, but you're going to vote for him anyway.
Oh, you will worry.
Yes.
We know that.
Yeah, you will wet the bed, but you will vote for them.
Right. Okay.
So
Probably.
it doesn't really matter who the Republican nominee is. So, don't tell me about how, well, the will of the people, and you have to let the... No, you don't.
I guess
They're
that's
not running
true,
on
too.
the issues.
Huh.
It's a cult.
That's a thought,
And
right?
who cares? Just get him off the ballot.
Find me this mythical voter who cares who the nominee is. I mean, give me a break. They nominated Sarah Palin for the vice presidency. People voted for her.
Right, exactly.
This can't be true.
So, I'm sympathetic. I'm
It's
a
an
lot more
interesting
sympathetic
argument.
to the idea of trying this than I was, because there's merit in it.
There
I mean,
is,
He doesn't
and-
deserve to be able to run.
That's
and if
true.
there is a constitutional reason for doing it and people can find it, take it to the Supreme Court, see what they say.
I mean, it's in there. Sheriffs aren't in there, but there's sheriffs running around saying they have ultimate authority under the Constitution. That doesn't make any sense. This is actually in the Constitution.
It's
Shouldn't
not
we
frivolous.
ask some judges what it means?
Ludig is right about that, and so is Larry
not-
Tribe.
What does he say? It's not what?
It's not frivolous.
Frivolous. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay, he just takes 25 minutes to say it, but it's good stuff.
But
they
he's very
should try.
clear in what he says. He certainly has a characteristic way of speaking,
He
but he also clarifies things.
does. He does. That's true. It is non-frivolous. They should test it. And I got to say, first, I'll have to make a strong objection to we should absolutely throw out the argument and maybe throw out all the people who make arguments about, well, you're interfering in the process kind of thing. I mean, by that logic, primaries are an interference
January
in the process.
6th interfered with the process.
Yeah, right.
Like,
well, that's
don't give me
true
a hard
too.
time about this.
Well, I don't understand why I have to run against other people and debate them. They're interfering in the process. If you just nominate me as your king, everything would be fine.
Vivek Ramaswamy would say, who's really interfering with the process? All of these media people who keep checking on my lies and throwing it in my face and making me explain why I said what I said and making me lie again right on television.
Is that not an interference in the process?
That's an absolute interference in the process, and they should stop doing it. It's probably unconstitutional, and if I'm president, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right. Why not? Yeah. Again, you can make up whatever you want in the Constitution. That is guaranteed in the Constitution, I think.
If you're worried about how the Supreme Court might rule on a theoretical case, Alabama says, hold my beer. I already know how they're going to decide. I don't care.
Yes.
I'm going to defy him anyway.
Mm-hmm. Brett Kavanaugh has actually reached out to hold that beer, by the way.
So he's holding everybody's beer.
I'll hold it.
Kavanaugh says, I'll do it.
Now hold it and give it back.
I
fine.
don't know what happened to it. So what happened is, of course, as you remember, Alabama had illegal
everything
districts that deprived black Alabamians of their vote.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court said, you got to go rewrite this. You got to have another black majority district here. Right. And Alabama said, okay, we can't.
Something like it.
We've tried it 2 or 3 times. And what happens is every single time we do it, we come up with something very similar to the first one.
Yeah. I don't see color, so it was very difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So the district court said,
I see the color. I don't want to come in the country club.
You can't do that. I mean, we'll do it for you. We'll do a special master, and we'll get it done in time for the election.
A real special master. For the
Alabama
right
said, wait a minute. We're going to take this back to the Supreme Court. And we're going to tell the Supreme Court that even though we ignored your ruling on it already, we want you to rule on our ignoring your ruling in our favor.
Yeah, that's... Well,
I am not
creative.
a lawyer, but...
Yeah, you're a
to
normal
me.
person, and yeah.
Here's the law dork,
just...
Chris Geidner's headline on his piece on it. Alabama continues fighting to ignore SCOTUS voting rights decision.
Yeah, that's all. He's got it right.
I don't get it.
I don't know.
The narrator, it doesn't make sense. Don't ask me to explain it.
That is not how this works!
Thank you, Justice.
Okay.
That would be, that sounds like Alito. No.
Right.
And yet that's probably how he thinks it does work. Well, yeah, you can't just walk around saying, I didn't hear you, or did you say, could you repeat that? You can't just do that over and over again. But apparently, well, they've actually had a pretty good track record of doing exactly that. They have perfected the art here, and they know that any question, no matter how dumb, takes about 2 years to settle. And that's how long a congressional election cycle is. So you just say, all right, we have to use these districts just one more time, and then we'll let you settle it once and for all. And then you go through 2 years, and they say, well, we said it the last time, those districts are illegal. Did you say an illegal, something about a sick bird? I didn't hear you correctly. Well, it's getting close to the election. We just have to wait until next time.
Oh, everybody knows you can't rule on stuff this close to the election.
Right,
well, how close
sure.
are you?
You're
2
interfering. It's an interference in the process. You can't have that.
Exactly right. The next thing I set aside was actually Kyle Cheney from Politico's description of what was happening at the Navarro trial. And we discussed most of it already, but this was the interesting part to me. A January 6th guy was supposed to depose Peter Navarro March 2022. Navarro was a no-show.
Okay, right.
So the Harris guy was one of the three witnesses the government brought to testify, and he was talking about being prepared for the deposition. He had a stenographer, and the stenographer recorded Navarro's absence, so it was pretty clear he was a no-show, so that's like beyond debate.
That's an easy gig.
And the judge, Judge Mehta, was caught off guard by Navarro team's plan to suggest that he might not have had any documents to respond to the subpoena.
Oh, okay.
Woodward, Stan Woodward, says they may try to argue that government failed to prove why Navarro didn't show up. I think the government only has to show that he didn't show up.
Yeah, right. You robbed the bank,
again,
but you don't know why.
I don't know this stuff.
You don't.
What I do know is closing arguments are today, and hopefully the jury won't take a long time.
I guess so. And yeah, another instance of where, Your Honor, I believe we're entitled to a few hours and maybe a couple of months of deliberation over the question of you didn't prove why I didn't show up. Well, we don't have to. I can't hear you. La, 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 la. There's a banana in my ear.
And I cite as an example of what I'm talking about, the Alabama approach to redistricting. And
isn't
it's right
this an
here
indictment of our entire American
so
system?
Everybody could see it.
Yeah.
Well, what has that got to do with any? Well, it doesn't, Your Honor, but I thought it was really interesting and I approve of it. So I wanted to work it in here.
Okay. The next day I'll hum the national anthem and walk out.
Speaking of the national anthem, I have to throw in our good friend Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, who said that one of the main reasons I'm wrecking the military and destroying our readiness is because the Navy is too woke. Like, I don't want poems on ships.
Wow, me neither. I hate poems.
Perhaps be benefited by going to school and learning that the Star-Spangled Banner started out as, wait for it, a poem on a ship.
True. What is he talking about? Do you know?
Nobody knows. And so it's sort of coming to a head because there was a Joint Chiefs of Staff sort of joint services editorial in one of the papers about how Tuberville is really aiding and abetting the communists. So, we'll see.
Communists. Well, That's a
well,
good
they got to
old
talk
one.
about it in conservative terms.
I guess so.
Anyway, that was just a throw. When you mentioned national anthem, and I didn't want to forget to mention that Tommy Tuberville apparently doesn't know the origins of the national anthem.
No, I guess he doesn't. That's very odd. By the way, has anybody, or why have we not proposed cage matches between Tommy Tuberville and the officers whose
And Mark
promotions have been
Zuckerberg.
blocked? Oh, if he wants, yeah. He seems willing. But yeah, I think all of the officers who are having their promotions blocked ought to have a chance at that too. And if he wins the fights, then the hold stays. If he loses the fight, you got to promote the guy.
Right.
One after the other.
So this morning on Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough started his hour with a 13-minute rant about Tuberville, which I really enjoyed. But I guess the point is it's really starting to get some national attention. Anyway, to finish up on our
Epic
legal
poem.
stuff, and this will spill over to the next hour
That
because
is
I think it's
fine.
really important.
There's
The
a lot.
main event in terms of legal political stuff was Judge Scott McAfee of Georgia
Okay.
hearing on television, so you could watch the hearing,
Yeah.
or hearings. I never figure out whether a single hearing is singular or plural.
Herzings. Yeah.
But McAfee was ruling on whether or not
You rule. Yeah.
Ken Chesborough, which is now the way to say it, so the cheese doesn't stand alone, Ken Chesborough
Ches.
is going to be tried along with the Kraken lawyer,
Crack. Okay, yeah, all right.
whatever her name is.
Powell.
Sidney Powell and Ken Chesborough will be tried together, and he hasn't ruled on whether the other 17, or maybe 16 with John Eastman, will go together, but it may be 2 and 17. It's definitely 2. They can't do it separately from each other. Well, we'll
All right.
talk about that after. But watching the hearing was really fascinating.
I'll bet. Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, or Court TV, as we sometimes have to call it these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's, perhaps frustrating for your listeners that I, a non-lawyer, is summarizing all of this lawyerese stuff. But I have to say, as a normie in this regard, looking
not a
at
weirdo.
what's going on in the courtroom, maybe with fresh eyes, you sort of pick out what might be important and what might not be important.
Yes.
For example, you were talking about Peter Navarro's behavior in the courtroom.
Yes.
He wanders.
Yeah.
But he was also talking to his attorney, whispering to him, and so on and so forth. Now, Scott McAfee's
Get out of here. Yeah.
courtroom
Uh-huh.
is slightly bigger than Aileen Cannon's,
So,
but
more
it's still
room to walk
relatively
around.
small.
Okay.
And he had Ken Chesborough, and he had Sidney Powell, the Kraken lady whose name I can never remember.
Right. We got it.
And then you also had the 8 prosecuting attorneys representing the state.
Yes.
Now, they were all in his courtroom. Chesborough has at least one attorney, if not
Sure.
2. Powell has at least one attorney, if not 2.
All right.
You had
They
the
don't
8
represent
people
themselves?
representing the state.
Yeah.
My point is, they all have to fit in this courtroom.
Well,
They have little
I think
tables.
They can do that.
but you can't fit all of the prosecutors at one table. You can't barely fit all of the lawyers for just 2 defendants at a table. Imagine 19.
Yeah,
imagine
be cool.
Squeezing all the lawyers in so that
Right.
Peter Navarro
Get
can
to
whisper
sit on
to
the jury's
one,
shoulders.
and the guy's whispering to another, and then one of the other 19 is so McAfee made the point that from a logistical point of view, doing 19 people is really difficult, and if you think you're going to do that in 3 or 4 months, that's somewhat unrealistic in his view. And he's giving concrete examples of why that might be.
We'll get a bigger courtroom then.
And that's why, even though he's a relatively inexperienced judge, he's clearly intelligent, articulate, and fair. And he's describing why, on the one hand, since Sidney Powell and Ken Chesebro have a request for a speedy trial, and they themselves have said they don't even know each other, there's therefore not going to be any hostile witnessing from one to the other, and there's no reason why they can't therefore be tried together. So your request to sever from each other is denied. That's my reasoning. On the other hand, I haven't ruled on it yet. State how many days, given my statements here about the logistics issues that I think are in play, and let me give you some other logistics issues that I think are in play. Let's say, for example, Mark Meadows wants to move his trial to district court.
Federal
and
court.
Let's to federal court.
They would call it, that's the district court, but yeah, okay.
Right. And let's say either he wins or he loses, but he appeals. How long would that take? And what if we sit a jury and start to work at a state level before it's resolved at federal level? Does that put Mark Meadows under a double jeopardy clause? Because we've already had a sworn-in jury looking at some of the evidence. Does that mean he can't be tried twice if it is removed to federal district court? And these are some of the logistical issues. I think you need to respond to me before I make a final decision, but I'm leaning against doing it as a giant case and state how many days do you think you need to respond? And they said, well, we need 2 weeks. And McAfee said, that's not going to happen. Give me another day. Well, how about 10 days? And McAfee said, well, how about 7?
Right.
I mean, but he was being fair. He was being clear. He was being articulate. He was being, just let me lay out what the issues are here, and you guys have to respond to them. I don't know that we can do 19. I don't know that we can fit them all in. I don't know that we've answered the questions of what happens when the feds start to interfere with what we're doing here. It's an issue. If you think it's not an issue, you're not paying attention. This is complicated. I don't think we can do it that fast.
All right.
And, you're listening to it and saying, well, he's got some good points here.
Some, yeah, of course, yeah. Well, that ends up, as far as Chesebro is concerned, that actually works against him and ends up screwing him. He's going to be stapled to
Sidney Powell and probably Eastman too. So now he's got, and Eastman he can't run away from.
That would be much more difficult.
Chesebro and Eastman go together. They were arguing the same thing.
Yes. That would be interesting. My advice for Chesebro is to put a box of Cocoa Puffs on the defendant's table and illustrate for the judge why they should, in fact, sever the trial, because Sidney Powell will not be able to help herself. She'll go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and everyone will see these two belong in, well, at least one in a padded cell, and the other can stand trial.
Well, the more people you have in the little mini group of we want a speedy trial, the more the government can tell their RICO story. And, of course, the government's arguing we need them all because we want to tell the entire RICO story.
They can
but you know what? If it breaks up into 3 and 16, they can still tell the RICO story. So I don't think that's a disaster for the state if that, in fact, happens.
And the other alternative is we could have these trials by drive-through. You drive through a McDonald's and we just tell you you're guilty one after the other, and it's off to prison.
Now, I think the most interesting point politically was brought up by David Jolly.
Sure
and he said, okay, let's suppose, for example, that Judge McAfee in Georgia says Chesebro, Powell, and Eastman go, and they go relatively soon. The October date is still there.
All right.
And we get a decision.
An open and shut case.
Open and shut case, and they're guilty.
Yeah.
And how does that affect the November election?
It's
and
awesome.
Flip that around. let's say the other one does take longer, and so we don't get an answer to that before the election. But let's say that Chesbrough, Powell, and Eastman are found innocent. What does that do for Trump's election?
It interferes. We can't allow it.
It's just an interesting, point to bring up. I think they're guilty, but that doesn't mean they're going to be found guilty.
No.
Because you never know what a jury's going to do. So sure, I mean, Trump could go on trial and be acquitted of all this stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. But what if some of these other people, in fact, are acquitted of some things and not acquitted of other things? And what's the political ramifications there? And it's really hard to game all of that out. So I just thought that was an interesting approach.
One thing we do know is you shouldn't be allowed to report that they were acquitted because that would be interference in the election.
Anyway, from a non-legal point of view, I can't tell you whether the 5th Circuit, 11th Circuit, 17th Circuit, 23rd in some other galaxy circuit's going to overrule any of these local judges. But Scott McAfee's presenting himself well, and it's pretty clear what his reasoning is. And Chutkan appears to be, under control. We don't see that because it's not televised, but she seems to have a handle on what's going on. And, in a lot of ways, that almost makes up for Aileen Cannon being Aileen Cannon.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Scott McAfee has his moment in the sun. Never really liked his antivirus program, but doing well as a judge. The Lance Ito of our times.
Yeah, well, this is NBC News, yet more legal stuff. Trump was warned the FBI could search Mar-a-Lago if he didn't comply with subpoenas for classified documents. The FBI ultimately searched the Florida state last year and recovered more than 100 classified documents, which led to criminal charges against the former president. So the idea was completely surprised by this. He was informed of the possibility by attorney Evan Corcoran, who kept notes.
Yeah, oh, well. And Trump didn't eat those notes.
And recordings.
All right. Well, Lordy,
I hope there's tapes. Well, there are.
There are. And I mean, you would expect that to be the case because that's how it always works.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, it worked that way. Remember, this is a case where everybody, the prosecutors are falling all over themselves to dot I's and cross T's. They absolutely informed them. He just either, I wasn't listening, I didn't understand, I had my fingers in my ears, and even though they're small, they were able to block most of the sound. No, this is all signed paperwork. We informed you or your duly appointed agents and got return signatures, and everything was on the up and up.
Well, it'll be interesting to see with Navarro. They never told me I had to show up.
Right.
Complete surprise to me.
Yeah, that's why...
I'm immune. Didn't they know I was immune? I told them I was immune.
Yeah. We didn't get that paperwork. Sorry. Let's try that.
Again, interesting.
They lost.
I don't know.
I never saw the paperwork.
I can't remember. I'm getting old. Like Joe Biden. Politico had a story about Trump's co-defendants are already starting to turn against him. Did we talk about that yesterday?
You listed it, and I think you may have mentioned it, but I don't know if we talked about it. I was turning it over to Scott yesterday and saying, I feel like we didn't talk enough about this if we talked about it at all. So let's do it now.
There's a nascent courtroom strategy by some people close to Trump. Heap blame on the former president. You could see that in the electors in Georgia, the false electors. Again and again and again, I keep saying to you, this is complementary to what Jack Smith is doing. The false electors are saying we were only false electors, fraudulent electors, because Trump told us to.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a good reason, but thank you for saying so.
Yeah. In court documents and hearings, lawyers for people in Trump's orbit are starting to reveal glimmers of a tried and true strategy in cases with many defendants. That's the point of bringing a RICO case. Portray yourself as a hapless pawn while piling blame on the apparent kingpin.
Yeah. And then in the case of the false electors, that's a pretty good and believable story. Like, they were probably ready to stay home and do nothing on December 14th.
So they
were called out.
Interview Michael Cohen, the fixer, not Michael Cohen, the writer. He was once Trump's versatile fixer, but now is a star witness against him in the New York criminal case stemming from hush money payments to a porn star.
Yeah.
So, again, a reminder, there's a lot of different cases that Trump is being tried for.
Porn. All right, go on.
Right. And last week, Trump's former White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, signaled his defense is likely to include blaming the former president as the primary driver of the effort.
Well, duh.
So thank you, Fani Willis, for getting all of that stuff done.
Yeah. Good job there.
Okay, and then for the last legal part, before we actually go into some of the political stuff, John Eastman's lawyer, this is a HuffPost piece, I think it's all the way at the end there. John Eastman's lawyer answers the question everybody's asking about his strategy. Legal commentators have been baffled by the Trump co-defendant's decision to talk about his case on TV.
Okay.
And his lawyer says, well, I didn't tell him not to.
I thought he knew.
Charles Burnham says they decided to throw out that, quote, typical defense playbook of hunkering down, end quote, and opted instead to speak openly about the case. Our view is Dr. Eastman is completely innocent.
Well, but that's so often the view of defense attorneys.
And so, Eastman's facts are wrong. He's lying about what he did. He admitted on TV he was guilty, all this stuff. And, again, my non-lawyerly view of all of this is that Charles Burnham has a well-educated, extremely intelligent idiot for a client. And the client is telling the lawyer how he wants to run it. He knows better.
Yeah, well, remember,
and we know how that goes, and we're seeing how that goes.
Yeah. I don't know if I see this one. I'm looking for, I don't know. I don't see any pictures of Eastman, so let me look again. Maybe the headlines.
Oh, I don't know. Let me just put it in case I didn't give it to you.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the easiest way to find it.
That'll solve everything. Okay.
There, it's right under the picture of the weirdo models.
Yeah. Hey, look, more weirdos.
More weirdos.
John Eastman's lawyer is a bow tie guy. You lose.
Well, I'm not going there.
Yeah, well, I'll do it. You lose when you're in a bow tie. I got that out of my yard sign files.
So let's talk some politics here.
All right.
We, I think, are entitled to a little bit of a summary about some of the stuff we talked about yesterday in Wisconsin with the Republican power grab.
That was a great story.
It is actually getting a lot of national attention. This is from the Washington Post. Analysis, Wisconsin's gerrymandering rides to the rescue of its gerrymandered.
Yeah, some interesting circle here. A snake that eats itself.
So the impetus isn't, this is Philip Bump piece in the Washington Post, the impetus isn't anything Protasiewicz has done in a brief tenure. Instead, one ostensible motivation for the move is alleged impropriety stemming from Protasiewicz's likely disinclination to recuse herself from lawsuits she discussed in the campaign trail. Well, if you're going to elect judges, that's what happens.
Yes.
Pretty much Wisconsin has decided that's okay, so long as you make it clear that's your own personal opinion and that it doesn't interfere with your judgment.
Yeah.
That's already settled law in Wisconsin.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know that they had actually adjudicated it, but I mean, it makes common sense if you're going to elect judges.
So then we talked about yesterday, the AP said that the Judicial Ethics Committee there, the Blogger Ethics Committee, took a look at it and said, it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, even in the Supreme Court of the United States where we don't elect them, they basically say, there's really nothing we can do about it. It's a matter of opinion anyway. They're not recusing themselves. There's nowhere to appeal to.
And so Philip Bump goes on to point out just how gerrymandered things are.
Yes.
And then says, should an effort to remove Protasiewicz go forward, the process works a bit like impeachment at the national level. If at least half the assembly votes to impeach, the decision for removal goes to the Senate. It's the assembly that has the two-thirds majority in the Senate, which is one short of two-thirds, where a two-thirds majority would have to agree to do so. As it turns out, Wisconsin Republicans control precisely two-thirds of the state Senate in a state that was essentially tied in each of the last two presidential elections. How do Republicans control two-thirds of the Senate? Well, in the past two cycles, there were 10 races that were uncontested, 7 of which were won by Republicans.
Well, that's
so
not really
rectifying disconnect between popular support and political power necessitates changing the boundaries. Luckily for Wisconsin Republicans, they have a tool at their disposal to protect their disproportionate power, the disproportionate power they granted themselves.
Yeah. It's amazing how much power you can grab when you have grabbed all the power.
Meanwhile, Jennifer Rubin, columnist in that same Washington Post, Wisconsin GOP entertains a constitutional crisis again. They've threatened to move forward unless she recuses herself in the case challenging the redistricting lines because Wisconsin limits impeachment to cases of corruption or commission of a crime, neither of which apply here. This would be a blatant misuse of the Constitution, a usurpation of judicial powers, and a violation of the separation of powers. But who would decide that?
I think the judges should be. Yeah, I'm impeached.
Well,
You're
judges
impeached.
should, but
this whole courtroom is
impeached. If they sideline her, as we talked about, if you impeach but then don't have a trial, you're on leave and you can't do anything, it's 3-3. And so what happens then? So the whole thing is just so bizarre. This is the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on it. Wisconsin Democrats pledge $4 million plus blitz to counter GOP and impeaching Protasewicz. Since they have the votes to do whatever they want in Wisconsin, this is a public relations counter. You can't counter it with votes. There are uncomfortable Republicans, as everybody reports, including the Democrats. And so the blitz would be concentrated on them. You can do this, but you're going to have a lot of trouble getting reelected. Look what happened when Protasewicz was elected in the first place. We can do this. We're very good. And don't go there.
Okay. Yeah, well, one hopes they get the message. But yeah, it won't be too difficult, I don't think, to motivate people on it. You just had this election. You just elected her. She hasn't even had a case.
And this isn't under the radar like Tennessee. Everybody's watching you every step of the way.
Yep.
So, that's an important message. In fact, there's a website you can go to contribute to the Wisconsin Democrats if you want to do that, but that's not why I'm here. I'm just telling you it exists.
Yes, you can find it, and you could give money to it.
Yeah, if you wish. Here's a thing that comes out politically that I think is fascinating and worth spending a little bit of time on.
All right.
CNN poll, Biden faces negative job ratings and concerns about his age as he gears up for 2024. Yet another head-to-head poll that shows that Biden and Trump are essentially tied. I think in this one, Trump is 1 point ahead. Jeff Garin points out that the negative views on Biden's job approval are like 7 points higher than most other polls. So you should take this one with a grain of salt, like you should take all polls this early with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple of things in this particular poll that is important. Most Democratic voters say they wish they had an alternative to Biden. That remains largely a show of discontent on Biden because they don't have anybody specific. They'd rather the Democrats run.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Well, most Democrats understand that Biden's too old for them if you ask them, but they don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
And they know he's going to be the nominee. And this is Democrats, settling in with the idea that I can't have my perfect choice that I want every single time. Right. So I'm going to have to deal with reality. But it's too early. The election isn't there yet, so I'm not settled into that yet.
All right.
Okay. And it turns out that Biden basically runs against all of the Republicans the same way. They're all close elections. It turns out that the person who isn't going to be the nominee, Nikki Haley, does best against Biden. Everybody else does the same or worse. Mike Pence, 46 Pence, 44 Biden. Tim Scott, 46 Scott, 44 Biden. Don't believe these numbers. The point is it's close, not that these guys are ahead. He's even with DeSantis, 47 each. Even in this poll, you can't get DeSantis to be ahead.
Too bad.
Right? Even Chris Christie beats him. He's 46 Biden, 45 Ramaswamy. These are not real numbers, but they're just interesting. And here's the thing that I take away from this, which is why the numbers look the way the numbers look, and then a little bit more on that. As of now, Republican and Republican-leaning voters are more deeply driven to vote in 2024, 71% extremely motivated, than Democratic-aligned voters, 61% extremely motivated. If you believe that, and again, what typically happens is the out party is going to be a little bit more motivated than the in party if you ask them. But if you as a pollster is going to structure your voting model based on that, you're going to get the wrong results, and that's how you predict a red wave.
Okay.
And get it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a probability-based panel, 1,259 registered voters, 391 Democrats, 898 Republicans. The survey included an oversample to reach a total of 898 Republicans because they wanted to look a little bit about the primary. That doesn't make it biased the way they actually figure the numbers. They even them out when they're doing the head-to-heads. Okay. But, the point is what they've picked up on is that Republicans are a lot more motivated at this particular point in time. They're juiced up by the indictments. They're paying attention a lot more than Democrats are because that often happens. Democrats are younger. Mm-hmm. Democrats tend not to pay attention to the last minute. This is not surprising. And Noah Wyckoff-Rudnick, who's an analyst, using a GOP polling firm called Signal, Cygnal. You may have heard of them. They're decent.
Okay.
Makes some really good points about the general atmosphere right now. He says, look, we desperately need Congress to get back in session so we can end the slow news day Trump-Biden head-to-head poll stories.
I guess. Not that anything more
Not that it's not
exciting is coming out
important,
of
but it's
that,
not new. We've been tracking this since 2022.
All right.
On our Signal tracking polling of likely voters, we have Biden +3. But one thing is to look at where we think turnout will eventually be, not the top line. This is what's so interesting. Among perfect voters, people who always vote in every election.
Perfect. Yeah.
Biden leads 50-44.
Okay.
Among presidential year-only voters, Trump's ahead by a point, 44-43.
I see.
Okay. Among occasional voters, Trump's ahead by 7, 42-35. Now,
So if you don't pay much attention or
who's a
rarely
likely
vote.
voter? How do you figure likely voters
Yeah.
among occasional voters?
I don't know.
I mean,
You wait
I'm
until
just
after the
saying, when you
election.
try to put together your picture of, well, here's what the numbers really show.
Yeah.
What the numbers really show is that the people that show up all the time are voting for Biden.
Yes.
The people who show up just for elections are tied. And the non-regular voters lean Trump.
Yeah.
And that's
'cause
like the difference between RVs
Those are
and
people-
LVs. And how do you really know? You don't. And that's why these polls are giving you a snapshot, which is skewed on my best guess of who I think will show up 14 months in advance without knowing everything else is going to happen. And that's why this very same guy showing, this is what our numbers show. And that's why I'm telling you, please don't pay attention to these numbers right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
And I think it's good advice.
it has to be. This is, this idea of, we asked people who are occasional voters, who are essentially people who, I'm an occasional voter. I never bother to show up to vote, except I really love Trump, so I show up to vote whenever he's running. Oh, well, who will you be voting for? Trump. Yeah, of course. So, obviously it will be skewed in that direction among that group. But yeah, it's a weird structure to the poll too. The oversampling of Republicans, as you pointed out, they correct for that in the head-to-heads. But I guess that's what accounts for so many people who have no shot whatsoever and have no real support among Republicans or Democrats show up as supposedly winning the race against Biden. It's wish casting.
The point of the
this guy
polls
was
isn't who's
the
winning
nominee,
or who's going to win. The point of the polls is to show right now it looks close. And you could see why.
Yeah, all it really shows is that it doesn't really matter who you nominate for the Republicans, even if he's 5 times indicted or whatever.
Right, exactly.
They'll all poll about the same.
Oh, the indictments are really helping. How?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, where's the data that says he's doing so much better than everybody else?
That's true, right?
It's not there.
No, how many times has Chris Christie been indicted? He's polling the same.
Yeah, exactly. So,
should indict him. Find out.
Fine. It's Trump is doing really well because he was indicted. No, Trump is doing really well because Ron DeSantis has collapsed.
Yes. And
but
people
look,
are weird and they want to
before
vote
the
for him despite-
indictments, Trump and DeSantis were running neck and neck, and now Trump is beating him soundly after the indictment. That's because DeSantis has collapsed, not because Trump was indicted.
Time is linear. A lot of things happened all at the same time. It wasn't necessarily the indictments that did it. It was various other things, like the other guy wearing Smurf boots.
Okay, further. So obviously the big issue is Biden's age. J.B. Last, conservative, identifies the Biden conundrum yesterday as Democrats have a hard time reconciling the fact that Biden's age is a problem and he's probably their best bet.
Okay.
And Benji Sarlin makes this interesting observation. Nate Silver wrote a newsletter about how Biden's age is an issue, and he can't believe people are minimizing it. Nobody's minimizing it. It's like all everybody's talking about.
Okay.
But Benji Sarlin says the thing about Biden is that, for better or for worse, he's a singular figure because of his age. He is the only Democrat with a brand that includes both Obama-era and Clinton-Reagan-era moderates. There's an argument he's the only one who would have won in 2020. Nobody else has that profile. So the rank and file Democrats are deeply uncomfortable with his age, wishing they had another nominee, and they don't have another nominee. There's absolutely nobody else who comes up as, that person should run instead.
Yeah. Partly because it's a difficult thing to run against an elder statesman who is seeking re-election.
Right, who actually has the support of a broad swath of the party.
Okay. Right. Well, okay, he's old. Jimmy Carter is 100. So there you go.
So, the idea that, Biden should step down because he can't win is stupid. The idea that Biden is going to win in a walk may turn out to be true, but something has to happen for that to occur. Right now, it would be Biden would basically win the same way he won in 2020. That's the most likely, thing that you take out from all of this. And just as in 2020, Trump could have won. It was close enough. And Trump could win in 2024. It's close enough. But there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be hitting Trump and the Republicans' image. And, a lot of these court indictments and so on and so forth are a big part of it. So I think that all of that is a very big deal.
Yes. Okay. Well, while it is conventional wisdom that you want to have a younger, more spry candidate if you are running against a indicted criminal who takes a golf cart everywhere and cannot walk himself, maybe things change. And also, he's a huge criminal and wants to destroy American democracy. That usually works against you.
So Magdi Jacobs, who's a pretty sharp observer, says, most democracies don't have these nonsense conversations about individual figures like is Biden too old. Because although certain figures can gain a bit of a cult following in some cases, see Donald Trump, there's generally less obsession with individual actors. If Biden dies in his second term, the overall projects he advanced are going to continue. Individuals are certainly important. Biden's done an excellent job as president due to his own talents. And of course, politically, he brings in all those different generations. But individuals aren't the be-all, end-all. Biden's efficiency and policy vision aren't solely linked to him. They're linked to the party.
Yes.
So the efficiency of the administration's staffers and the tendency to be obsessed with individual actors like too old muddles everything. Why would you have a progressive challenger to Biden? What would they do that Biden couldn't do or hasn't done?
Live, I guess, is the only thing I can think of. And, even so, what continues your legacy most strongly more than anything is,
winning.
Probably, winning, right. And then if you die, people are sympathetic to your cause afterwards. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg says bye. There it is. We talked right into the break. There was a lot to do, and I stepped on his ability to say, okay, well, I'll see you Monday. So I'll say it for him. He will see you Monday. He will not see you. You will not see him, but figuratively speaking, all of this is absolutely the case. Okay. Right. So as we were saying, there are many, many things that we need to catch up on. I want to go dive into Pocket, although I haven't been paying close enough attention. I've been disregarding my social media inputs here, and so I've not been watching closely whether people are trying to steer the direction of the show. And all right, well, I don't think that they have, so that's good news. I haven't missed anything anyway, but all right, let's see. I'll have to call up the hashtag, the KITM hashtag on the Dying Bird site in order to be sure that I haven't missed anything on that front. Well, there's been some things I've seen, but we haven't had a chance to get to. But they'll all wait because there's more to discuss. Let's see. First of all, let's bring up this story because it's an interesting follow-up to something we've discussed before, and Scott sent it to me last night, and I'm intrigued to read it because I was too busy watching some television to actually read this thing last night. A football coach, and it's all about football coaches these days, Tommy Tuberville, etc. This is the other one, Kennedy, that we heard about at the Supreme Court. That guy, remember? A football coach who got his job back after the Supreme Court ruled, oddly and incorrectly, that he could pray on the field. Well, you remember that, right? Coach Kennedy. This is the one, of course, who was leading his team in prayer on the field and then saying in the Supreme Court, hey, come on, this is private moments. You can't dictate what I do in my private time, except he was having the whole team pray at the 50-yard line right before the start of the game in front of everybody in a full stadium. right? And the Supreme Court pretended that wasn't what was happening. And was it Alito who was saying, this is private? This was not during the game, so it's on private time. It's seconds before the game begins at the 50-yard line in the full stadium. Private contemplation. Well, anyway, the Supreme Court said, you got to rehire him. So what ended up happening, the school district said, well, we, unlike Peter Navarro, Republicans in general, the state of Alabama, understand that when the Supreme Court says something, it's to be observed. And so they rehired him only to have the coach say, well, I resign now anyway. I am sure what ended up happening here is the coach found during his suspension that there was much more money to be made and much greater fame to be gained giving speeches about how upset he was about not having been rehired than there ever was in football coaching. And then the Supreme Court ordered him rehired, and he was rehired, and he said, well, what I really want to be doing is giving these speeches to adoring crowds, so I resign. So I think there's a little bit more to it here, but this is, let's see, there are bullet points about it. And what a strange structure here of the page I've been pointed to. I guess it's actually interesting. What am I looking at here? Ground.news. And I guess this is an aggregation page which offers up pages by topic and offers all the other major news sources' takes on it, and you can click through them and read them. But each of the entries is ranked for, ranked on a spectrum. The page I'm pointed to here with the headline I just read you, a football coach who got his job back after Supreme Court ruled he could pray on the field has resigned. That is designated as a center-leaning article. And I guess you can click on left and right and get different headlines as a result. I wonder what the right says about this. What does the right say? That doesn't change the headline, but the bullet points beneath change. This is an interesting exercise all by itself, as a matter of fact. So the center view here, the centrist view in the bullet points presented says, after winning the right to pray on the field, high school football coach Joe Kennedy has resigned, citing personal reasons and the desire to advocate for religious freedom outside of the school system. Kennedy's resignation was confirmed by the Bremerton School District, who did not provide further comment on the matter. And Kennedy's fight to return to his coaching job became a national issue, with the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately ruling in his favor and emphasizing the importance of mutual respect and tolerance for religious and non-religious views. That, I guess that's supposed to be centrist. I don't know. So I clicked on right before, but let me click on left. And it gives me a different set of bullet points. These read, and all of these things are generated, as it says here, by Ground News' own AI engine here. The supposedly left-leaning view of things is, after winning a Supreme Court case regarding his right to pray on a football field, high school coach Joe Kennedy has resigned from his position. I don't see why that's left-leaning. Kennedy cited various reasons for his resignation, including the need to care for a family member out of state. That actually sounds like I don't know. That's pretty centrist, too. I don't know what's leftist about this. The Bremerton School District confirmed Kennedy's resignation and stated that it would not issue any further statements on the matter. None of that seems left-leaning in my view. Let's see what happens on the right. Coach Joe Kennedy, who previously won a Supreme Court battle over his right to pray on the football field, has announced his resignation from his coaching position. The resignation is effective immediately, and Kennedy cited the need to care for an ailing family member as one of the reasons for his decision. Kennedy expressed his interest in pursuing ministry work and advocating for constitutional freedom and religious liberty, but I suppose he'll be too busy for that because of the sick relative. But, wink, wink, he's really going to be doing this, I would guess. He mentioned that he and his wife have been traveling and giving speeches at different events, and they have seen a strong desire for inspiration among people. again, I don't know if this is particularly right-leaning, but there's certainly more talking points of interest to right-leaning readers. And then lastly, in 2015, Kennedy lost his coaching job after saying a silent prayer on the football field. That is right-leaning because, of course, it was at the 50-yard line. After a legal battle, he was reinstated as an assistant coach in 2023. However, Kennedy's future in coaching was uncertain, and he mentioned feeling anxious about people's expectations. He knelt and prayed on the football field during his first game back, and he emphasized the importance of being a light in the world. So there you have it. That's interesting. The right, left, center view of all of that, which is also interesting because what it means is here's the centrist view, here's the left view, which is identical to the centrist view, and that should be something you understand, we understand it, but the rest of the world probably doesn't take notice of it because they clicked on center and left it there. But wouldn't it be interesting for the rest of the world to find out that the supposedly left view is actually centrist after all, and that the only one that differs significantly from what left and center actually think is those lonely weirdos on the right? Well, anyway, I guess that's it. He was reinstated by the courts, and in order to, give a nod to the courts, he decided to come back for one game, and then suddenly found that he was really, really interested in something completely different from coaching football. But not that you should think that he was going to tour the country making speeches for money, because he had an ailing relative that he had to care for / also travel around the country and give speeches and get a phone update on the ailing relative every once in a while. Okay. So there you go. And then there's a list of news articles about it. Again, these two also offered up by all, left, center, and right. What's up for left? And then, by the way, each article is ranked with other tags here. The NBC News report is top of the list for quote unquote left. And the NBC News report, high school football assistant fired for preying on field, then backed by the Supreme Court, resigns. It is labeled lean left. It is labeled high factuality. And it is labeled wealthy private owner Roberts family. I guess the owner of NBC News. Is that right? So that's, I guess, all the tags you're supposed to have in mind when you evaluate, I guess. I don't know. I'm not certain what there is about NBC News that leans left. Republicans certainly think so, I guess. But interestingly, lean left, high factuality. CNN, lean left, high factuality. Orlando Sentinel, lean left, high factuality. The Delaware County Daily Times, lean left, high factuality. Barry Today, lean left, high factuality. Seems to be like they go hand in hand, leaning left and having high factuality. I wonder what it says on the right. Do they all have high factuality? Not all of them. Let's see. There's the Daily Press, lean right, high factuality. Boston Herald, lean right, high factuality. And World News Daily, is that right? Or World Net Daily, WND, is that right? Far right, low factuality. How do you like that? Washington Times, lean right, mixed factuality. Fox News, right, it doesn't say lean right, right, mixed factuality. Oh, by the way, for WND, it doesn't say lean right. I thought they all said lean right, but I was mixed up because all the things on the left say lean left, lean left, lean left, lean left. Is there anything that doesn't say lean left? Not in this list, but they all say lean left and they all say high factuality. Over on the right, there's lean right, high factuality, lean right, high factuality. WND gets far right, low factuality. So that's interesting. I wonder if that corresponds. Washington Times was lean right, mixed factuality. Fox News, right, mixed factuality. Not far right, not lean right, just right, mixed factuality. And let's see, My Northwest, lean right, mixed factuality. So that should tell people something too. It just won't because nobody's using ground.news. But there you have it. I just found that interesting. On the left, it's all lean left. There's no left or far left, and everybody gets high factuality. On the right, it's mixed as to how right you are, and it's mixed as to how factual you are. And that seems kind of wacky and crazy. What can I tell you? All right. Also of interest, the bias distribution here is interesting. They say 58% of the sources of their news on their page are center, as they say. And that includes AP, CNN, NBC News, I don't know what this is, SOO Today, Sue Today. What is that for? Sue Today. I don't know what SOO Today is. It's Canadian press, I guess is what it says. So Canadians probably know right off the bat. But anyway, so that they also had Barry Today, and then they have, I got to hover over these things. There's 3 more. Anyway, I guess there's no point in listing them all, but they're all these ones that are counted as center. This is the bias distribution. So they have 2 columns over toward the left, one which would be solidly in the left, one that would overlap left and center, then 3 columns solidly in the center, then 1 column straddling center and right, and 1 column solidly in the right. Here is how the sources that they use populate this spectrum. The total number of things appearing solidly in the left, 0 sources. The total number of sources straddling the left and center, 0 sources. The total number of things occupying the left portion of the center, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 listed, and then plus 3 more in there, so 8. The number of center of the centrist spectrum, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 17 more, 22. Then the number of sources listed on the right end of center are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The number of sources listed straddling center and right, there are 2. And the number of sources in the far right column, 1. 1's not a lot more than 0, but it is more than 0. But it is interesting that the whole fairness spectrum thing is, look, everything is center right. There aren't any left, and they have to label something as left-leaning because there is something on this end of the scale. It's just that nothing stretches all the way to the left pole of the scale. And I find that interesting all by itself. So thank you very much for sharing not only the story, Scott, but this source of sources as well. It is the source of all sources. We didn't really read the story itself about what happened, but I think you kind of got it from the bullet points. There you go. So having fought so hard to get his job back because God and country, he found out that, I didn't really want to return to that job anyway. But thanks for dragging us all through the controversy nonetheless. All right. So other things that I have in pocket to discuss. What's this one? I have something that only comes up as, oh yeah, okay, no, that's important. We'll have to keep that one open, but CNN doesn't display the headline for some reason in pocket here. But let's see. Other things that I thought I should share with you. Well, here's one update. The Dallas Morning News reports that a judge, we're back to the courtrooms here, a judge has ordered Texas, and we know who they are, right? Texas, to remove those anti-migrant river buoys and rejected Governor Abbott's invasion claim as well. This, according to, is this right, Aaron Torres at the Dallas Morning News, which is a content, they've got a paywall for their content, ironic given the subject, but we're going to get around it. Just like people crossing the Rio Grande, I guess, although some of them didn't make it past that. Texas must remove those floating border buoys by Friday, September 15th. It's a week from tomorrow, and cannot install any similar structures in the Rio Grande without receiving proper approval, a federal judge wrote on Wednesday in a scathing ruling, they're all scathing these days, criticizing Governor Greg Abbott for ignoring federal laws. As if that were a theme emerging from among the Republican ranks. U.S. District Judge David Ezra wrote that he expects the Justice Department to prevail in its civil suit against Abbott, The Biden administration argues that Texas violated a federal law that forbids unauthorized construction in navigable waterways. They did. Texas argued the rules didn't apply because the barrier is in a part of the river that's too shallow to be navigable. Okay. I mean, by what? At any rate, the state also said that it has the right to self-defense under the U.S. Constitution. In this case, to protect itself against a migrant, quote, invasion. And that's a great way to get yourself thrown out of court on your ass. Ezra disagreed. The court has found that the United States is likely to succeed on the merits of its claim that defendants have violated the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899. He wrote, the court also finds that Texas's conduct irreparably harms the public safety, navigation, and the operations of federal agency officials in and around the Rio Grande. So how do you like that? Texas filed an appeal, of course. It was not immediately clear if that means the state will refuse to comply, pending a ruling from the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the nation's most conservative appellate courts. This ruling is incorrect and will be overturned on appeal. Abbott said in a statement, of course he's going to say that, we will continue to utilize every strategy to secure the border, including deploying Texas National Guard soldiers and Department of Public Safety troopers and installing strategic barriers. A spokesman for the Texas Department of Public Safety did not immediately respond to questions about whether it would comply with the court's order. Abbott previously boasted that Texas was not asking for permission when it installed razor wire along 60 miles of the border and the 1,000-foot floating barrier 2 miles downstream from Eagle Pass. Texas can also appeal the injunction to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. DPS installed the barrier in early July. A survey conducted by the joint U.S.-Mexico agency that controls access to the river found that 80% of the buoys were actually on the Mexican side of the border, so maybe they should just shoot them and deflate them. Texas quietly moved the buoys into U.S. property. Quietly. We effed that up. They should have seized them. Anyway, at an hours-long hearing last week, Ezra rejected Texas's assertion that a migrant, quote, invasion gives the state broad latitude to install anti-migrant defenses without federal permission. Ezra, a judge appointed by former President Ronald Reagan, Saint Reagan, said the case has to do with whether or not the buoys impede navigation along the Rio Grande. But in closing arguments, Texas filed last week, attorneys representing the state said the Justice Department had failed to prove that the buoys obstruct navigability. And even if there were such evidence, Texas has clear constitutional authority to defend its territory against the invasion that Governor Abbott has declared, the state said in a 12-page filing. However, as it happens when it comes to invasions,
That is not how this works!
That's right. Abbott has remained defiant ever since the Justice Department filed the lawsuit. He went on Fox News and said he's willing to appeal the lawsuit. Wow! All the way to the Supreme Court. I can't believe it. And a few weeks later, he said he wants the justices, to grant states more leeway on immigration enforcement. Well, they won't. Which courts have ruled is the job of the federal government. But he wants them to say that it isn't. So, just so you know, he wants that. The buoys, however, have drawn international condemnation and scorn from congressional Democrats and President Joe Biden. Mexican Foreign Affairs Secretary Alicia Bárcena, I think I got that right, has sent 3 formal protests to the United States since late June complaining about the buoys. Bárcena also has relayed the demands directly to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas in meetings early last month. Being very diplomatic, this is the way to do it. Mexican officials believe the buoys violate international treaties signed by the two countries. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO for short, right, has openly, but probably openly, repeatedly complained about the buoys in his daily press conferences and has called Abbott's actions at the border inhumane. And he is right. He has also said he would not meet with Abbott in the future. And that's probably all to the benefit of AMLO for that matter. I wouldn't meet with Greg Abbott in the past, present, or future if I didn't have to. Okay, so we got that on record. That was important. And let's see, we still have a few minutes before our next break. So let's jump over to, this intrigued me because I always love when Trump talks aloud about his dumb ideas about how things work, because, of course, we've heard it twice already.
That is not how this works!
That is not how this works. That's not how any of this works. In the Rolling Stone magazine, which may or may not be right, protected, it is, yes, okay. We'll borrow their article again. I'm sorry about this. If you guys ever go on strike, that would be a wise idea, because then I wouldn't feel all that comfortable about doing this anymore. But I probably would anyway. Because it's very expensive to keep up with all of these subscriptions, which is a good opportunity, as Elsie pointed out the other day, to let you all know that we need your support here at Kagro in the Morning. It's true, not only because, we got to make a living and got to give some reason for spending at least the 2 hours with you each weekday morning instead of working as a Walmart greeter, let's say. And not to mention the hours spent gathering all of the stories and parking them, editing the show afterwards, posting it as a podcast, paying the fees monthly for the right to post them via Libsyn and then have them distributed in all those fine podcasting networks. Not to mention all of the work that Justice has been doing, getting up at negative 14 o'clock in the morning, West Coast, to make sure that this thing gets streamed to you live. There's a lot of, this eats up a good portion of the day. And by the way, I guess it's fair to say that from about 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or so, my day is pretty much dominated by preparing for, presenting, editing, distributing this show. It makes it awfully difficult to then go out and flip burgers or whatever else we could be doing with our time for, we wish $15 an hour, but not exactly. But in addition to all of that, paying for the technology, paying for the computers, paying for the subscriptions to podcasting services, and paying for the few subscriptions that we actually pay for in order to get the news. If we paid for everything, why, we'd never stop begging for money, which is really, as others have pointed out, what most of these shows do for most of their hour anyway. And we barely do it, and we do 2 hours. So in recognition of all of that, you've all given plenty, of course, if you're listening at this point. If you haven't and you're contemplating joining the ranks, please do. Patreon.com/KagroX. It makes it the easiest to do once and have the job taken care of each month. If you're already doing it and you've reached your legal maximum, then ignore the law. Let the Supreme Court send troops after you. Let them try and stop you from donating even more money. Why? I'll show them. But another thing you can do, of course, lean on friends. You too should be donating. And if you don't know why you should be donating, well, come and listen to the show. And then you'll find out, and you can join the ranks of those who support us month after month. Now, back to the people who I am at this point, because I'm not a billionaire, unable to support month after month, but I could do this at far short of $1 billion, I think. Over at Rolling Stone, Peter Wade, who deserves to be paid, it rhymes with Wade, writes, Trump, and this isn't about Trump's colon, so don't get upset about this, but Trump, that's punctuation, I am allowed to do whatever I want with classified info. That's something that he says. Of course, we already knew he believed that, but it's written up again, published yesterday, so let's see if there's some new angle here. Donald Trump says he absolutely plans to testify in the federal government's case against him regarding classified documents, anyway, that he removed from the White House. And I guess his planned testimony, whether or not this is actually what he delivers when he gets on the stand, remains to be seen. But right now, his position is, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I'm allowed to do everything I did. The former president told conservative podcast host Hugh Hewitt, because of what a centrist Hugh Hewitt is. In an interview on the Hugh Hewitt show, I don't know, he makes plenty of money as Hugh Hewitt doing the Hugh Hewitt show. So I always worried about this being a dumb name for the show, but it works for everybody else. And again, that should trigger even more donations, right? Why is Hugh Hewitt making money doing this nonsense and not us, right? No reason for it except, I don't know, something. We don't have a grift machine on this part, but let's build one. Anyway, in an interview on the Hugh Hewitt show that dropped Wednesday, and every day it happens, it drops, if you ask me, the host asked Trump, Did you direct anyone to move the boxes, Mr. President? Did you tell anyone to move the boxes? For some reason that is asked twice, referring, of course, to the boxes of more than 300 classified documents that the federal government had to seize last year from Trump's Per-Valago estate. And the answer is, of course he did, but that's not what he's talking about. I don't talk about anything. What, are you kidding me? That's the dumbest statement he's ever made. I don't talk about anything. You do nothing but. All right, I don't talk about anything. You know why? Because I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I come under the Presidential Records Act, Trump replied, while also taking a quick detour to bash Hewitt. I'm not telling you. You know, every time I talk to you, I have a breaking story. You don't have any story. I come under the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do everything I did. Not only incorrect, but incoherent. But I like the fact that he used that as an opportunity to attack Hugh Hewitt. I would too. We're in agreement on that. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, which you should also be supporting financially, by the way. All right, well, just thought I would throw that one in there at the end. So it's not just me. Everybody needs support, including the people at Rolling Stone who we really ought to support. They do good reporting here, and to prove it, I will read more of it. So that was an interesting, if not particularly fact-based statement by Trump. I come under the Presidential Records Act. Yes, that's true, and that actually speaks to the case in the opposite way. You are supposed to leave those papers in the custody of the National Archives and Records Administration because of the Presidential Records Act. It's not, as I guess he's never read it, but that's not a hard thing to guess. But now we have context for believing that. The Presidential Records Act says those records belong to the government and not to you. But because it says presidential and you think presidents are all powerful, or at least you wish they were, that's the way you understand the law, which is to say that you do not. So anyway, I guess that's the, I guess this must be an embedded tweet about that tells you that those guys actually did say that thing. I never really understood why it is that they feel the need to illustrate their stories with pictures of transcripts tweeted via social media, in addition to telling you what was actually said already. But there you have it. Anyway, Trump has long been misrepresenting what is allowed under the Presidential Records Act. The law states, upon the conclusion of a president's term of office, or if a president serves consecutive terms upon the conclusion of the last term, the archivist of the United States shall assume responsibility for the custody, control, and preservation of and access to the presidential records of that president. There is an allowance for presidents to keep records that are of a purely private or non-public character and unrelated to presidential duties, but many of the documents Trump was found to possess come from government agencies such as the CIA and the Department of Defense. Trump even bragged on tape post-presidency about holding on to plans for war with Iran, which is to say that he reads it entirely backwards. When Hewitt asked Trump if he would testify in his own defense at trial in a documents case, the former president said, "That I would do. That I look forward to, because that's just like Russia, Russia, Russia." It is not, but he wanted to say that. "That's all the fake information from Russia, Russia, Russia. Remember when the dossier came out and everybody said, 'Oh, that's so terrible, that's so terrible.' And then it turned out to be, it was a political report put out by Hillary Clinton and the DNC? No. They paid millions for it. They gave it to Christopher Steele. They paid millions and millions of dollars for it, and it was all fake. It was all fake. So I look forward to testifying. I look forward to testifying. Forward is the way I look when it comes to testifying. So word salad. I look forward to testifying. At trial, I'll testify, Trump added, as though that was a useful addition. Of course, Trump loves to talk a big game, and we won't likely know if he will actually testify until next year. The classified documents trial is set to begin in May of 2024. Hewitt followed up by asking, why? If you do testify and they ask you on the stand, did you order anyone to move the boxes, how will you answer? He's intent on getting an answer for this. "I'm not answering that question for you," Trump said, "but I'm totally covered under the law." In addition to discussing his legal troubles, Hewitt asked Trump for his thoughts, well, that's a mistake, on an unrelated topic, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And the answer is, "I'm a racist, so I gotta say something. I know that they don't like me," Trump said. "I said that I don't think that they're very appropriate, what they're saying, what they're doing. And I didn't like the way she dealt with the Queen." So, that's okay. Nobody liked the way you dealt with the Queen either. That's actually it. And then they, again, show a picture of them, of it being reported by someone else, the recount, that they had said such a thing. There you have. Trump added that he would, quote, "love to debate Markle, except, so what?" Anyway, I don't know. I thought that might be interesting. In fact, it generally speaking was not, except that it was a great opportunity to say, once again, Trump is dumb and he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he deserves whatever he gets and more. Anyway, let's see. There's other courtroom news having to do with Trump. It also comes from the Hill and probably a part of their bombarding me with notices in my email. It works. I shouldn't say so because then other people will do it. But if you guys did it, and you're the only one hearing me say that it works, that would be okay. I'd be happy to have contributions or ideas about what we should be discussing in the show from you. I'm less happy about it from the Hill, if only because I don't know them. But, it's good stuff. It's good, at least good fodder for conversation. They may think that by handing me their written articles, I will just be reciting that, those, what they've written about it and nothing else. But once again, that is not how this works, not on this show. So I feel okay about it. Every time that they offer up an article, it's just a launching pad for more discussion. Sometimes a discussion about how poorly I think they've covered the issue, if that's the case. Though sometimes they do a pretty good job with things. This one is Trump dealt big loss in E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuit. Yes, there have been some more developments on that front. It's a little technical and procedure-y, so maybe we'll pick our way through it. But E. Jean Carroll won a partial victory in her second, or really first, and still continuing, defamation lawsuit against former President Trump on Wednesday, with the judge ruling that a trial, in this case, is needed only to determine how much Trump must pay the writer in damages. In other words, the, second to go to trial suit for defamation, which I believe is actually the first suit that Carroll filed against Trump, but then she filed a second, more narrowly defined and more easily clarified case afterwards, and that one actually has been adjudicated. And because it's been adjudicated, there won't need to be a whole trial again over the question of, did Trump in fact do this thing? Did he in fact rape E. Jean Carroll, as she claims, and then defame her? The answer is yes. The other trial took care of that. All we need to do on the first one is say, okay, given the outcome of the second trial, he's guilty of doing it. He's guilty of the defamation. How much should he have to pay as a result? And that's the only issue remaining for the second trial. That is a significant blow for Trump. And it reports here in the Hill, U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan ruled Trump defamed Carroll by making false statements with actual malice in June 2019, when she came forward with accusations that Trump sexually assaulted her years earlier. By the way, I don't believe I gave credit for the writing of this piece. Zach Schoenfeld, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and you're listening. One, you can tell me whether I'm right about your name. And two, yeah, now you can't say I didn't credit you, which I really should have done at the top of the story. I apologize. Kaplan ruled that a jury's May verdict in Carroll's other lawsuit against Trump, which found him liable for the assault itself and for defaming Carroll last fall, is controlling in the case. The jury found that Mr. Trump knew that his statement that Ms. Carroll lied about him sexually assaulting her for improper and ulterior purposes was false, or that he acted with reckless disregard to whether it was false, Kaplan wrote. Whether Mr. Trump made the 2019 statements with actual malice raises the same issue. A trial is set to begin in New York on January 15th, the same day as the Iowa Republican caucus, by the way, and Kaplan's ruling means the trial is only needed to consider how much Trump owes Carroll in damages. Carroll is suing Trump for defamation over his 3 initial denials of her story when the longtime advice columnist came forward publicly. It comprised a written statement given to reporters, comments Trump made on the South Lawn, and an interview he gave to The Hill at the White House 3 days after the allegation was first published. While the case was held up over immunity issues, Carroll, earlier this year, took Trump to trial in her second lawsuit. The jury ultimately sided with Carroll, finding that Trump sexually abused the longtime advice columnist in a New York City department store in 1996 and defamed her in an October 2022 statement that denied her story. Trump is actively appealing that verdict, known as Carroll 2, but after it was handed down, Carroll began arguing that the verdict automatically makes Trump liable in her earlier lawsuit, and now the judge agrees. The judge on Wednesday did, in fact, agree, ruling that Trump defamed Carroll when making the first 2 statements at issue, though he did not find Trump automatically liable for his interview with The Hill. We remain very confident that the Carroll 2 verdict will be overturned on appeal, which will render this decision moot, says his other rent lawyer, Alina Habba, Trump's legal spokesperson who represents him in that case. Anyway, we also anticipate that the Second Circuit will stay this trial as it considers the meritorious defenses that have been raised by President Trump. Except that's talking out of our hat, perhaps, and none of that may come to pass. Trump's attorneys had argued in court filings that the substance of Trump's 2019 statements differed from the one that the jury found him liable for in Carroll 2, I guess. The truth or falsity of Mr. Trump's 2019 statements therefore depends, like the truth or falsity of his 2022 statement, on whether Ms. Carroll lied about Mr. Trump sexually assaulting her. Kaplan wrote in Wednesday's ruling, the jury's finding that she did not, therefore, is binding on this case and precludes Mr. Trump from contesting the falsity of his 2019 statements. Mr. Trump's contrary arguments are all unpersuasive. Carroll's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, who is not related to the judge, celebrated the ruling. We look forward to trial limited to damages for the original defamatory statements Trump made about our client, E. Jean Carroll, in 2019. The January trial is one of many, I would say, the former president is scheduled to face in the coming months as he campaigns to return to the White House, and then, of course, listing all the ones with which we are already familiar. So we'll skip that part of the article. So there you go. You understand what's happening here? It's basically common sense. They said, look, we've already been to trial. A trial has reached a conclusion, a verdict. The verdict of which depended on a finding of fact by a New York jury on the question of, did this event happen? Did Trump do it? And then did he defame her about it by denying it and saying that she was lying? And the answer is yes. And when it comes to the question of, okay, how much should he have to pay for damages when he did it in 2019? Like, okay, if you find that the assault took place and that in 2022, when he said, no, it didn't, and she's lying and she's crazy, if he's liable for that, then it stands to reason that when he said in 2019 that he didn't do it, that she's lying and she's crazy for saying so, he'll also be liable. But they're saying, but those were different statements. He didn't say anything about these statements in Carol 2. So why should we be liable in Carol 1? And the answer is because all of the mechanical facts that would lead to liability in Carol 1 were established by the verdict in Carol 2, and that's how logic works. But they say, they're different statements. They were made at different times, but they say essentially the same thing. And it doesn't really matter that you used different words so long as there's a finding that the words were defamatory and that they are without factual basis. That's what matters. If you said, well, I was found liable for calling her a scumbag in 2022, should I be found liable for having called her a scum face in 2019? After all, they're two different words, and most people roll their eyes and say, we all know what this means. No. But they're going to, they're wasting time and resources saying, I used different words, or I said the same words at a different time, and you didn't say anything about that time. Yeah. Well, as we say with everything,
That is not how this works!
And so it is not. Just thought I would explain that point. All right, other things to share with you that are still hiding in pocket. Let's see. I got to scan and make some decisions about which are the things that I want to highlight today versus save for tomorrow. Maybe that's more of a Friday thing. I was going to go with this one, but we'll go in a different direction. We'll head down to Florida, where Judd Legum has been doing some interesting and insightful work. Well, he hasn't been doing it in Florida, but it has to do with Florida. Maybe he's doing it in Florida. I don't know where Judd lives. But at any rate, his popular information newsletter carried this story just a day or so ago, 2 days, in fact. This too, an intriguing headline. Weird. Disney tickets, PS5s, PlayStation 5s, and big screen TVs. Sounds like Black Friday shopping for the Christmas holiday. No, it is shopping spree motivated by, misappropriation of resources. And it shouldn't surprise you that Ron DeSantis has something to do with this. Disney tickets, PS5s, and big screen TVs, Florida parents exploit DeSantis's school vouchers. And I think probably somewhat by design, and DeSantis is probably quite happy that they're doing so. They're grabbing up taxpayer money, keeping it out of the hands of public schools, giving it to parents, and not restricting their use of it, such that I'm sure DeSantis is saying, well, they're stimulating the economy, so that's awesome. What's going on here? It is what would otherwise be tagged as waste, fraud, and abuse if what was happening was the misappropriation of funds from a democratic backed initiative. That would be waste, fraud, and abuse, and plenty of grounds for Republicans to vote to end it. But when it's what happens with Republican programs, that is awesome, and trickle-down economics. So there you go. Which basically means that trickle-down economics is, in fact, waste, fraud, and abuse, which it is. I mean, that's an accurate description. So what's going on here? Judd will tell us Florida parents are taking advantage of an expanded school voucher program, championed, of course, by Governor Ron DeSantis, according to messages from private Facebook groups obtained by Popular Information. The private Facebook messages reveal how parents are using the new Personalized Education Program, or PEP, P-E-P, which provides about $8,000 annually, to thousands of homeschooled students to get taxpayer-funded theme park passes. It's ironic as hell that they are, of course, going to Disney World with it because, of course, DeSantis is engaged in a protracted war with Disney as being too woke, etc. And now his favorite woke people, homeschooling parents, are spending the money he's sending them not on education, not that he ever cared that the kids be educated, but spending that money on Disney. That's the part that probably galls him a great deal. $8,000 annually. Supposed to be used for homeschooling, but instead is being spent on theme park passes, big screen TVs, and other items with an attenuated connection to education. That's putting it mildly. PEP is limited to 20,000 students for the 2023-24 academic year, but will expand dramatically in future years, increasing by 40,000 students annually. Wow. And then, as everybody finds out that you can use that money to buy yourself toys, I imagine people will be flocking to the program, which is designed to impoverish and destroy public schools. And so, they'll waive all of this waste, fraud, and abuse off and just say, well, the intention was to destroy funding for public education, and we are achieving that. In one exchange posted on a private Facebook group last month, a parent inquires if anyone has had luck getting passes to Disney World approved under this program. That seems unusual. I pressed the wrong button to get the pop-up out of the way, so let me regain my footing here. They've asked whether anyone's had any luck getting passes to Disney World approved through the program. Another parent responds that she was able to get passes for Disney World and Universal Studios paid for with taxpayer funds. That is awesome. The members of the group then discuss how to characterize unlimited annual and semi-annual passes in order to secure approval. And I guess maybe we should read the exchange here, because the exchange is embedded, and this time it's got information that isn't in the body of the article here. Let's see. Somebody is saying, I'm sure they aren't familiar. It seemed like some sort of multi-day pass from your description, but not unlimited for half the year, which is like an annual pass. So, okay, the key is don't say annual pass in the descriptions, maybe. I guess you want to avoid that language. I don't know why that helps at all, but it does, apparently. Voucher funds are available to many more students this academic year as a result of legislation signed by DeSantis last March. And I'm sure there was great fanfare, and he did the Trump thing of showing everybody the signed document and surrounded himself with school kids who probably didn't really want to be there. And I think I remember that photo op too, because the kids did look rather depressed, and they were having a day off from school. But anyway, I'm sure it was like, well, we're going to be doing the right, we're going to be paying for kids' education, and public education's been such a failure, but we're going to use the money so much more effectively now. And as it turns out, they weren't using it for education at all, or they're going to allow people to say, I am, quote unquote, educating my students at Disney World this year. And, it's funny because the justification is probably not all that outlandish, right? Like it wouldn't be unusual, I would think, for public school students in Florida to have, a senior trip at the end of their senior year. There's a day off and everybody goes to Disney World. That seems pretty standard. I mean, around here, we don't go to Disney World because it's too far away, but they take the kids to Busch Gardens or King's Dominion, to Virginia theme parks. That happens, right? And everybody sort of excuses it as, sure, it's a waste of money, although sometimes they collect money for the tickets and we have to pay. But I'm sure there's some subsidy from the school system. It's hard work for their 4 years, or it's hard work for us, but a reward for their hard work as they get ready to graduate and enter the job market, armed forces, college, what have you. One big send-off. So homeschooled kids don't get that, right? So we should be able to. And I guess that's why they're like, well, don't say it's an annual pass. Say it's something else, because then it's excusable. Because, around here we don't say, congratulations, you can spend your whole year at King's Dominion or Busch Gardens. Trademark, send me money. Anyway. That's an advertisement for you guys, by the way. You should cough it up big time. Anyway, back to the story. So that's what they're doing. Previously, the voucher program, DeSantis, had hailed the new law as the largest expansion of education choice in the history of these United States. Not the other ones, but these. Previously, the voucher program was restricted mostly to low-income families. Now rich people can go to Disney on a government dime. The money could only be used for private school tuition or transportation to an out-of-district public school back then. But now, the new law eliminated the income caps and allowed thousands of homeschooled students to receive approximately $8,000 in vouchers as an educational savings account, which can be used for any approved expense. So as opposed to vouchers, which, okay, here's $8,000, but it's in the form of something that can only be used to pay tuition at an accredited school, they now say, instead of giving you a voucher that can only be used for those purposes, what if we gave you cash and said, do whatever the hell you want with it? Well, how would that be used? Students who attend private school and have leftover funds can now also spend the money this way, and meaning on anything they want. A small number of these accounts existed prior to the new law, but they were limited to students with special needs. Florida has delegated the administration of the vouchers to two private nonprofit organizations. Why? I don't know. Step Up for Students and AAA Scholarship Foundation. These nonprofits generate revenue based on how many students they can attract. So they are incentivized to meet the demands of parents who receive vouchers. As the Tampa Bay Times reported, Step Up for Students' new guide to approved expenses for recipients of PEP vouchers in the 2023-24 academic year authorizes the purchase of theme park tickets. Theme park tickets were previously a prohibited expense, but Step Up for Students reconsidered after hearing from parents about the potential benefits. In another private Facebook message obtained by Popular Information, dated August 9th, one parent laments that she has an old TV that could really use replacing. She asks whether she could use the voucher funds to replace the TV if she were also buying a screen and projector. One group member tells her that she can buy a new 55-inch TV, while another assures her she can buy all three, the new TV, a screen, and a projector, with voucher funds. Oh, I'm going to be showing educational programming, you see. The Step Up for Students purchasing guide authorizes the purchase of TVs up to 55 inches, but no bigger. Don't go crazy. Public schools also purchase televisions, of course, but those are used by hundreds or thousands of students. Televisions purchased through the PEP voucher program will only benefit a few students, at most, the ones in the house, of course. But remember what the argument here is. Well, you shouldn't disadvantage homeschoolers. They should be entitled to all the same benefits as these public school students. But, in a public school, you pool the resources and, like I said, buy, as Judd puts it, buy a TV, and hundreds or even thousands of students can use it in turn to watch educational programming or waste their time. I suppose that's possible too. But, well, then why should homeschool students not be able to have access to a television? Well, they do have access to the television. It's waste, fraud, and abuse to say that there should be a specially purchased television that you watch only for educational purposes. Wink, wink. And you don't. Rather than, saying, well, every student should get a new TV. Well, that sounds like actual waste. As opposed to one TV for 1,000 students, it's now a TV or two or three in for each student, and they watch them at home and they can use them for anything else in their off hours. No one can watch the school TVs. No one gets to take home a 55-inch TV from the school to watch movies on it when school is done. But hey, equity, right? Anyway, in another August 2023 message, a parent sorts through the logistics of using taxpayer funds to buy, get this one, an $800 Lego set for my kid for Christmas. Because that's an important part of the curriculum, getting presents for Christmas. I mean, that really blows it all out of the water. But you make it work. Step Up for Students permits all voucher recipients to spend up to $400 annually on Legos. So how do you get to the $800? I have 2 kids. Maybe you can try that. Will that work? By the way, they're also discussing, you should see this message. Real question. Do we think caps are coming back per section? If so, when do we think? And will it be only $400 for Legos again? Only $400. I really need an iPad and a laptop. So, engineering a way to get $800 Legos plus an iPad and a laptop. In a private Facebook message dated June 12th, a parent says their PlayStation 3, quote, isn't doing great. Wow, that is sad. Yeah, but anyway, she needs to get something new because education, of course. She asks whether she will be reimbursed for a $500 PlayStation 5 bundle that includes the educational program Gods of War, even though the game is, quote, not age appropriate for her 5-year-old daughter, because, of course, God of War is for the parent to play, more than likely. But hey, maybe she has special needs. Step Up for Students authorizes voucher funds to purchase video game consoles, but only for special needs students. So there you go. Other approved expenses for all homeschooled students this academic year include swing sets. They have them at schools. Foosball tables, occasionally. Air hockey tables. Skateboards, kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, dolls, and stuffed animals. And of course, Eggs Benedict every morning for the teaching staff. Not really. Gene Allen, founder of the National Center for Education Reform and a proponent of vouchers, defended these kinds of expenditures in an interview. We'll read some of that to you over the music. Allen said, young people today expect 21st century approaches to learning and recreational opportunities for their physical and mental well-being. And that's all true. But as pooled resources, it makes sense, whereas as privately owned individual resources, maybe it just does not. Second section of the article here. While Florida spends billions on vouchers, the state's public school teachers remain underpaid. That will surprise no one, but a point well worth mentioning. And Judd does mention it and discusses it at length in the remainder of this article. But that's all the time we have for today. We're just going to have to leave it there. But luckily for you, leaving it there means leaving it to Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which follows this program immediately on this very stream on Netroots Radio. What has he got on tap for you today? We got a little more time to discuss it. How long, he asks, does it take to put an election theft conspiracy on trial? Important question facing all the judges everywhere. And then, on the rest of the menu, another judge in action. A U.S. federal judge orders, well, you heard about it here. Texas has to remove Abbott's illegal floating buzzsaw border barriers. More on that from Justice next. And, of course, Wisconsin's gerrymandering case rides to the rescue of its gerrymandering. That's the angle you heard from Greg earlier today. But, you know, there are a couple more stories here that we haven't touched on. I'll share those with you next.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
More about Ron DeSantis as the former Orange Osceola state attorney files a lawsuit against DeSantis and asks the Florida Supreme Court to reverse his order removing her from office. Then elsewhere in the world, the European Union will target Apple, Amazon, Meta, and other big tech companies in the next phase of its big digital crackdown. They're leading the way there in Europe. Stay tuned.